Hey everyone, and welcome to the Let's Do More show. I'm Chris Rufflin, and I'm so glad you're here. This podcast is all about powerful personal stories of resilience, recovery, and overcoming life's toughest challenges. Here we dive deep into real life experiences on perseverance and personal growth. We'll explore what it takes to develop a positive mindset and how to transform adversity into strength. Along the way, I'll be sitting down with inspiring individuals, including celebrities in recovery, to help break the stigma of addiction, talk about mental health, and provide hope to those who need it most. Let's Do More. It's about finding hope in the dark moments, surviving the unsurvivable, and learning how to manifest the life you desire. We'll uncover insights and lessons that not only help us push through life's toughest times, but also turn those experiences into a force for good in our communities. So whether you're looking for motivation, healing, or just a reminder that you're not alone, you're in the right place. Let's do more. Hi, welcome back to the Let's Do More show. My name is Chris Rufflin. I'm the host of the show. And today on our episode, we've got kind of a split conversation. I've got a friend on the line, Ben Schwen, who has dealt with some addiction recovery type stuff, is also an entrepreneur. I think a lot of you are going to get a lot out of the show today. So please, as usual, hit like, share, download the show. The more people that we get this information out to, the more people we help. And that's really the purpose behind the Let's Do More show. Additionally, I do want to thank everybody out there who's been listening and been sharing the clips and taking a look at everything on the social media. Our numbers are going way up, and it's very organic, and it's really what is supposed to happen, I believe, with the way this whole idea works. For me, passion about things that are important in life is where I'm at in my life. And it's no longer became a chase of making money, but what can I do on a daily basis to help mankind? And this show is one of those things. So I really appreciate the support as always. If you know someone who's struggling or needs help, feel free to reach out. And if you're somebody who thinks, hey, I've got a great story and I'd love to be on that show and tell that story to help people, win at life, please reach out to us on one of our social media channels. They'll all be tagged in these videos. And we'll look forward to talking to a lot of you soon or hearing back from you. So Ben, welcome onto the show. Appreciate you taking some time here out of your day and jumping on, have a conversation and help a few people out, man.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you for having me. So
Yeah, very cool. And I love, how we met. So me and Ben are we're in a mentorship group. You guys hear me talk about all the time about how important it is to have healthy mentors in your life. And, we'd never met face to face, but through that group and through some apps we have and social media stuff, saw some posts and asked to be on. And I appreciate that. I think it takes a lot of courage, to come on and get vulnerable and, put your message out to the world, whatever that looks like. So again, I do appreciate it, Ben. And, the other thing that's awesome is a lot of people know this, but I rarely do I ever turn anybody down for a show. When I first started the show, it was all about, God's will, not my own, really. And yes, I talk about God, and if that turns the viewer away, so be it. It's just a word unless you make it mean something else. But yeah, everything's supposed to happen. We're supposed to meet. We're supposed to have this conversation. I know some great things are going to come out of it. So tell me a little bit, Ben. I mean, let's go back a little bit. Let's kind of go back to growing up. So I want to go over, what it looked like for you growing up. You also grew up here in Utah, so primary, LDS, community, as most people know. And we were both born and raised into that. And then I think have both kind of found our own spiritual, way versus religious way, which is fine. And there's nothing wrong with religion either. I believe that everybody should be passionate about what they support. So tell me a little bit about growing up. What was it like, for you, and what did some of the teenage years look like, and kind of fill me in a little bit on that part of your story.
Oh man. So my childhood very different from a lot of those raised in Utah in the LDS community. So I'm the youngest of 7 kids and had a single
There you
mom
go.
my whole life. So this is where things change. Yes, the number of children is, is
She
on
was single
par.
mom with 7 kids.
Yeah, single mom my
Wow.
whole life. Yeah. So we didn't have an income in our household until I was 12 years old.
Wow.
And she was going through school. So we were supported a lot by the church and by the church members and, of course, the government assistance, things like that.
Yeah.
And so, with that, I never really had structure in my life. So, there's a thing, my older sibling found me 2 blocks away when I was 2 years old in diapers, just roaming the streets.
Right.
That's kind of how my whole childhood was. All the way up through my teenage years and everything. I just kind of did whatever I wanted, which is, I mean, it gave me a lot. Let's see, a lot of experience dealing with people. I had to, make friends and kind of sell my way into eating dinner at their parents' house because we didn't really have a lot of food at home.
Right.
Um, there was I would specifically target certain people in the neighborhood who would feed me,
Yeah.
and but also with that came, I got into drugs at a really early.
Yeah, I think it's hard, to jump in real quick. I mean, I married a woman who was a single mother for 5 years with 3 kids. And, I know what she went through with them and dealing with the other side of the parenting and all that. And it's really hard. I mean, so for most of your life, your younger years, your mom was probably in survival mode, right? Just trying to make ends meet, trying to figure out how to take care of her kids. And I think you got to do what you got to do. What's interesting about that, Ben, is, there's this story of two boys, right? And they both grow up the same way, kind of in a broken household like that. Dad's an alcoholic, you know, um, and everything was hard from growing up. And one of them, turns out to be an alcoholic as well, and really just ravages his whole life. Doesn't really go anywhere with anything. Addiction takes him out, and he ends up homeless and on the streets, and eventually, dies with that disease. Whereas the other brother, goes out and becomes insanely, wealthy and successful in all areas of his life. Successful marriage, successful father, and it's funny, before that one passed, someone had asked, what was it that caused your addictions? What was it that made you go down this path? And his answer was, well, I watched my father, go through. So it's all I ever knew. The other son was asked the same question, and he said a very different answer. He said, well, I watched my father go through that. It was all I ever knew. And I knew I didn't want to be that way.
Right.
And so I think, for anyone listening to the show, whether you've had a rough upbringing or not, I feel for you. I have empathy for you. I know what that looks like as well. And it's super difficult, but I do want to make sure people understand that you can really create whatever story you want to live. And that's how our brains work. And, you've got those two boys with totally different perspectives and totally different places they went in life. So fast forward a little bit. So you're in your teenage years, you get into drugs and alcohol. What did that look like? I mean, tell me about the first time that you used and what it felt like
Oh,
and
really?
where it led.
I mean, yeah, no. First time I used, I was 10 years old, and a buddy of mine saw his older brother doing this, and said we should try it. We got they used to call them cherries, but it was like little cough medicine, little
Right.
pills, and then bottles of Robitussin. We'd chug a whole bottle of Robitussin, or send some of that cough medicine back, and just run around the neighborhood, and just, I mean, it probably did some major damage to my body. That's
Yeah.
probably lost it into here. I've got some things with my kidneys I've been looking at. I'm like, well, probably some bad choices I made growing up.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
might have
Definitely
been,
impacts later.
yeah. So yeah, I mean, that was the first time. I mean, and I think, going back to like why you did that. I mean, I was just, I was always just wanting to, I think, kind of explore and escape at the same time.
Right.
I wanted to experience the world, but I also wanted to escape it at the same time. It was,
Yeah.
um, there was a lot of that going on, and another thing is I just felt like, I wasn't scared of consequences. I just didn't have that. Um,
Where do you think that came from? Do you think that was from just, having so many siblings and mom not being able to not handle, that's the wrong word, but not being able to be there maybe as
yeah,
much as she wanted for each of you?
yeah. I mean, she tried. Bless her heart. She really. I mean, I've never seen harder working person in my life, but
Hmm.
it's she did her best. They're just, you know, I think it was just too much. There was, all of us kind of had some of those issues growing up, like every
Yeah.
single child except for one. So um, she was, dealing with not
A
only
lot.
my
Yeah.
older siblings kind of going through stuff, but then her trying to, finish school so she
Mhm.
could, you know, give us a better place to live, and all of that. And so, yeah, I think it, you know, I don't blame my mom for any of that. She's an amazing woman. but yeah, there was just no, I just, I knew that nothing could happen. Even if there was a consequence, there's nothing that could follow through with that. Or,
Right.
I didn't have much respect for authority or anything like that as well. So, yeah,
So where did that lead to for you? I mean, I know we talked a little bit before the show, and you mentioned that you sobered up at a pretty young age and have been able to maintain it. But where did that lead in the end for you? What did that look like? And I will tell you, there are going to be a lot of listeners out there that are listening to this that might be parents too. And I think
yeah,
it's really cool that you recognize that your mom worked hard. We've also dealt with addiction with some of our kids, and it's really tough as a parent, because there's a fine line in, what you can and can't do, and what works and doesn't is never predictable or coachable. It's, you kind of have to try what you can. But what ended up happening, and how did your path into recovery look like, and kind of getting back to, the path you're on today?
yeah. So over the next 6 years, just got harder drugs. I'm
So
not
from
sure.
10 to 16, basically, right?
Yeah, yeah. And I'm not sure if I have the most super addictive personality, but I just, if something was around, I was doing it. And the things that were around got harder and harder and harder. I was never deep in like a heroin, addiction, or deep in a meth addiction, but I did plenty of meth and plenty of heroin.
Right.
Same thing with cocaine and all of that. And it was just, I was just always chasing after that. It became a thing that was just like, I'm looking to go get high, however. Made
Yeah.
as many bad friends as I could have, Yeah.
All the things you see coming with it. What tell everyone that's listening to the show maybe a little bit of what does that feel like? So, we interview a lot of people that are adults from addiction and in recovery and have built some pretty amazing things out of their life. Some of them from coming from straight from the streets to where they're at today, and having a master's degree in social work and helping other people. What does it look like though for somebody 10 to 16 years old who's struggling with these addictions? Was it about fun? Was it about avoiding? Was there a point where you thought, I'm not going to be able to stop this, I might be in some trouble here?
Yeah, yeah. So it was about fun. It was about fun and avoidance. I mean, that's you hit it on the head with that. I mean, I just wanted to avoid dealing with the reality of life and
Mm,
the weight of responsibility, the weight of the world, really. And what really got to me was one night I was at a house party, and we had all done ecstasy. There was maybe 20 plus people there. And me, so I was like one of the last people awake. I think I ended up being the last person awake. And a friend of mine, we're still friends to this day, she showed up. She, so it was me and her, and we were kind of watching the sunrise together. And she showed me a picture of my older brother who was in a bad heroin addiction. He was really deep into it. Showed me a picture of him, and she was like, your brother is literally dying. Like, he looked like a skeleton. He looked
right,
like he was literally just dying. And I just got flashes of like, and these are my older brothers, right? And I just got
right,
flashes of like, oh my God, like, not only could, if I continue this, and if they continue this, like, I could be at my brother's funeral. And I was
yeah,
always very close with my siblings because we all kind of raised each other. We all kind of, we were all kind of there for each other in all different ways, good or bad.
yeah,
Um, and so that just, it hit me like a ton of bricks. And um, I ended up going home that morning, and I woke up my mom, and I just said, Mom, I need something that will change me. I have to be a good example of my brothers. I have to have a future. Like, even if you send me to detention or jail or something, send me somewhere. I need to get better. Like, I need to have something else in my life, because
right,
I don't want to see my brothers go through more of that. I don't want to, see more friends die. By that time, a few of my friends had died from specifically heroin.
at
And
16.
yeah, yeah.
Wow.
So,
Wow.
um,
So you go to mom, you tell her enough's enough. So
yeah.
obviously, and I guess that was the turning point for you, was really seeing your brother and having that realization of that's where I'm headed, right?
Hmm.
you know um I think everybody who I know everybody who gets into recovery, that's a moment we all share. It always looks different, right? It's always different facts of how it happened and what happened, and the stories are different. But what I find is like the feelings are all the same, right? It's despair, it's pain, it's regret, shame, guilt, and for people to recover, a lot of times they just have to get to a point where they get there. I think it's really extremely lucky in your story to have a friend like her who pointed that out for you, because who knows, without that conversation, you may have never ever got sober,
Yeah, very true. Yeah.
right?
Yep.
I think a cool thing about that too, I want to point out for people listening that might have kids that are struggling, it was a supportive conversation, right? Your friend didn't come to you and go, hey, you're a mess, you either clean up or I'm not going to be your friend, or, do this or this is going to happen. She really came to you and just authentically said, I'm worried about you and I care, in her own
Yeah.
way there, which is
Yeah.
super cool. Very
Yeah.
cool. So what does mom do about this? Did she know you were using like this? She knew kind of what was going on with you? And
Yeah. I mean,
yeah,
I'd be gone from the house for 3 weeks. I'd already had like a weed charge, an alcohol charge,
right.
and so I'd been to detention before. So I'd been in the system already. There was, you don't really make it that far without,
Yeah.
being in the system somehow. And I had a buddy of mine who had gone to a couple of buddies of mine who had gone to the Utah Boys Ranch,
Hmm.
who were like in the Boys Ranch. Um, and I brought that up. I knew it would be too expensive for her, so that's why I was thinking about other things. But brought that up to her, and she called up my uncle, who's he's a professor at MIT. He's really we'd go spend the summers there sometimes, and always just the most amazing guy ever. Just extremely humble, extremely just one of the best people ever. And so he agreed to pay for me to go there, and so I was the first boy to actually submit himself into the Utah Boys Ranch, since it
I
was
was going to say that must not be very often.
yeah,
I've done
since
some
it
work with some of the youth in recovery, and
yeah
um, uh, a lot of them do not get it just because of the fact that they were forced to go,
yeah
by judge or by parents or whatever. And I think, it's very hard to recover when it's something that's forced upon you because you're just not done yet already. Some
yeah
of those kids do recover, but um, again, man, there's no accidents in God's world. You know what I mean? And
yeah
what a miracle that you even got there. Other cool thing about that story I want to point out too is just, it's important that people have support. How cool is it? You guys had this uncle who came
yeah
and said, hey, I care. I want to help out,
yeah
because the resources for youth between the ages of 12 to 18 is a giant gap. It's
yeah
very hard, and there's not a lot of places they can go to get help. There's several, but there's waiting lists and all kinds of complications, and you need good insurance and stuff, and it makes it hard. So your uncle pays for you to go into this boys ranch. What
yeah
was that like?
yeah. So it's at least how it was. I mean, they've had tons of lawsuits against them and stuff. And I'm not dogging on Boys Ranch at all. I actually really cherish my experience there. And to this day, I think back on how amazing it was and how it set my life up.
Right.
But for most kids, but all the ones who, like the 99% who didn't want to go there, including my two friends who ended up staying in addiction after the Boys Ranch and all of that, they have stories of their own. But yeah, I mean, the first 3 weeks, so you get there. The first 3 weeks, you're on what's called work crew, and you sleep on a cot. You get up at 4 a.m. And I got there in the middle of winter, and so all you're doing is working all day. If you stand out of line, if your shirt becomes untucked, if you don't have your hands behind your back, if your belt is off or something like that, you have to do push-ups even in the snow. And so I got there, and it was just like, what the hell am I doing? Like,
What did I just put myself in?
it was, oh man, it was a huge shock. Like, the it was wild. The number one thing uh, that was really getting me was just like, I need a cigarette. Like I was like, I'm gonna escape
Yeah.
from here. Even though I put myself in here, I'm gonna escape from here just so I can go have a cigarette. Like nothing else.
Yeah.
I didn't want to do anything else. I was actually feeling kind of happy that I was out of the situation I was in. But But yeah, it was just that freaking tobacco that got me more than anything else. But I didn't escape. I didn't try to leave or whatever. But yeah, first 3 weeks, and that can last longer as well if if you're not good at following instructions and all
Right.
that. But yeah, I mean, uh, and then right around the time you're getting off work crew, you go from work crew to a green shirt, which is essentially instead of working, 4 a.m. until 7 p.m., you get to go to school, and it's run by military people. The principal's a military guy. The vice principal was like a black ops special agent guy. I think the principal like was in the Secret Service. He was like the bodyguard for the Secretary of State. That's this huge military background. But you also get assigned elder missionaries. So LDS Church, it's a non-denominational Christian kind of
Right.
school, but you get assigned LDS missionaries when you go. And I remember the moment. So it was just a really, really dark first 3 weeks there. It was just pure darkness, just pure
Right.
angst, pure like, oh my gosh, what am I doing? This is wild.
And you're detoxing from substances too,
Detoxing,
right? All while you're doing the harder work. Yeah.
and it was. It's almost like that's. I mean, the way I think about it, I couldn't imagine a better way to kind of get out of where I was at though, because if I had any sort of comfortability, going into that, I feel like it wouldn't, the effect wouldn't have been as
Yeah.
strong, you know.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think the consequences, and for you, you mentioned earlier like there was no consequences to me going out and using and doing all this stuff, and mom was
yeah,
doing the best she could, but really, I didn't care about the consequences if there was any.
yeah,
And what's interesting about it is it's like life kind of creates its own natural consequences, right?
yeah,
That led you to have that conversation with her and her with you, and then checking yourself into here. So, how long were you in this boys ranch? So you do the work program, you kind of get feel a
yeah,
little bit better. I'm sure you graduate through different levels, right?
yep,
How long were you there? And what do you think you took from that experience? What were the most important things?
yeah. So I was there for a year. So typically they want you to be there at least a year. Some people are a bit shorter because their parents convince their therapist or whatever.
To let them, yeah, yeah,
They
been
manipulate
down
their
that
way.
road. Yeah.
Yeah, and so, but I was there. I wanted to do as much, and they actually wanted me to stay there and play basketball. I got really good at basketball because I had so many credits in like extracurricular credits I needed to
Hmm.
catch up on. So I had two. I just did two PE classes right in a row, and the guy just let me play basketball for like 3 hours a day, and so I got really good at playing basketball. And what's crazy is when I was, the 3 months before I was going to graduate from there, Sean Bradley, I don't know if you know him, but
Hmm.
he was on Space Jam for,
Yeah.
the original Space Jam for some of your
Yeah.
viewers.
Yeah.
He's the tall, dumb guy. And he really does look like a monster in real life. He's an absolute monster. But his wife told him he needed a job and to go do something, and so he came and signed up to be the athletics director at the Utah Boys Ranch. And so I got to meet him and stuff, and he tried to convince me to stay there, and he's like, "If you stay here and play basketball," because it was like I don't even know what division it was, but they really wanted to be good at basketball. He's like, if you stay here and play basketball, I could pretty much guarantee you a scholarship to the U of U and like all these other things he was talking about. I was just like, I want to be the first kid in my family to graduate from public school. And really, I wanted to leave. I was at the
Yeah.
I was there. I was at that point. I've gotten to what's called the A team, which is like once you show you're good at leadership and all this stuff, you actually can tell other kids to do push-ups when they get out of line and
Hmm.
all that stuff. And, I learned three different instruments while I was there. I hiked the highest mountain point in Utah, Kings Peak. We did like the 80 miler. It's like you're there for almost for like a week and a half. You're just hiking up and down mountains. Hiked Southern Utah a bunch. I mean, really learned the meaning of leadership there big time because they put you in situations where it's like you have to step up or no one else is.
Yeah. What are some of the things? Let's kind of shift into that actually, because I want that to be a part of our conversation today too. Is talking about how you got out of what you're getting at. But what did what does that mean to you? I mean, leadership, what were the things that were instilled in you then that you felt like helped you in the life you have today?
Really, it's a lot of it is like leading from the back, right? If there's someone in your on your team or in your group or in your company or something that's really struggling, and it might not be, it might be some of their fault, might not be, it doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
You still have to get to your destination, you still have to climb the mountain. So there was a time we did a winter camp there. So we all hiked up to the back of Timpanogos. It's a mountain here in Utah Valley, and we dug down. We built a whole like dining area. Everyone had to build their own snow cave. So we stayed up there for 4 days. But there were some kids there that were pretty severely overweight, and they couldn't carry their equipment up. One of them lost one of their snowshoes, and so
Yeah.
I was like, okay, we could just keep walking and struggling and have tons of people way out in the front and kind of a small group of people in the back who like are like, no one's here to help me. We're
Yeah.
struggling. It's like, okay, how about we get two of the best guys up there? You guys go grab that, grab his pack. I'll give him my snowshoe. We'll help push him up the hill. We'll help get there. And we all got there, and it was a good learning experience, for everybody, and I just think that can be done in so many ways. You see a lot of people who claim to be leaders, and yes, they might be leaders in some way or another, but if you're not there looking out for every little member of your team, and you're just you might have some people helping you get ahead, but if the whole team is all working together, you get to your destination a lot more efficiently. And, everyone feels like more of a tribe, more of a team, more of a group. And so I've really kind of adopted that. I mean, I do feel a lot of empathy for people. I think maybe just because, my upbringing and seeing, how much people did for me growing up, and how much they put themselves on the line to make sure my family was taken care of, make sure I was fed, make sure, my mom wasn't struggling with just simple yard work and things like that.
Yeah, and I think that's a good thing to point out too. I mean, that's awesome, awesome technique in leadership, which really works. Leading by the iron fist, leading by fear, and all these things that people might think leadership is. It's exactly the opposite. If you want to have successful leadership, and I think as well, if you're listening to the show and you're a type of person who's giving back or helping other families that are struggling, or I know Keaton, the owner of Limitless Group, does a lot of things around Christmas for families that can't make it. You're not wasting that time or that money or that service you put in, because as you just heard here from Ben, what he took out of it was he was able to create a great empathy for other people who were struggling. And instead of judging them or pointing the finger or bullying them, he was able to actually say, "Hey, I'm here to help you out. Let's do this together." So you fast forward a little bit, you get out of the boys' ranch, you become an adult, and then I know you got into a business, right? You started getting into business. How did you get into even the idea of having a business? I mean, because most people are just going to go to school, get a job, they'd be happy with that. What made you go down the entrepreneurship path?
Well, I've always been a musician, as you can see some of my drums here. I, since I was really young, I picked up my first instrument when I was 9 or 10 years old. I got really into playing the drums when I was preteen, probably about 12, 13 years old, and I started my first band. The other thing is like I was mowing lawns growing up. I was, as soon as I could get any
Right,
sort of
right.
job, I got one. I was me and my buddy, the one I was actually telling you about before this started, who's that sales manager at the roofing company.
Mm-hmm.
Me and him started a lawn care company when we were 14. We printed our T-shirts. We went and knocked doors everywhere, and we were busy all summer long mowing lawns and doing that sort of stuff. So it's just I've always just like I've when if you asked me when I was a kid what I wanted to be when I grew up, I said I wanted to own my own business. I just thought it was so cool.
It's crazy how similar that is. I've interviewed a lot of entrepreneurs on the show. I'm one myself. We got a lot of friends that I surround myself with that are as well. And a lot of us that was the case. Like, I remember sitting in the sandbox and having these wild dreams compared to other kids and things I wanted to do. And, I'd get laughed at for saying I wanted to travel the world for a living, or, make enough money so I could do that. And so What do you, I mean, do you think it was just something that you were kind of born with and instilled with, or did you ever have early in the years of business, like did you have some mentors and people that you were able to kind of build and replicate off of?
I mean, I did have mentors, and that was in other ways. When I was in a pretty serious band when I was from like 19 to 23. We were touring. We played 256 shows in one year, so we were constantly playing shows and getting pretty big. And the running a band is the same thing as running a business. It is absolutely the same thing. You have to
Yeah.
focus on your product, your marketing, your service, I mean, scheduling, um, and making sure everyone's there on time. Everyone has, I mean, it's the exact same thing, and it's a very hard business to run.
Oh yeah.
Um, and so I was doing that, but I had my daughter, and I was really needing to make extra money. And my saxophone player, I knew he made good money, and we were on tour in Boise, and he was sitting there. This was what was this 2011 maybe, and he was sitting there writing code, and I didn't know what code looked like or anything at this time. I was sitting there writing code while we were on tour. I was like, "You're making money while we're on tour," and this is before working remote was like a big thing. Like no one
Right.
really worked remote and all that. He was able to sit there and just make money. And he made multiple six figures, and he was a super smart guy, super whiz. But I was like, "Can you teach me that?" So we went to a Denny's, and we met at a Denny's one night a week for about 3 months. I used some money from student loans. I was enrolled in college. Used some money from student loans to get a new laptop, and he showed me how to write my first program in the language of C. And then was working working about 50 hours a week, doing my band, and being a dad. Oh, hey, bud. Yeah, you have that. Hey, I want to be here. Well, I wanted you to. Oh, thank you so much. Love you, bud. That's my son, Leo. So,
You're good, man. Yeah, he's cute.
so, um, so we were, yeah. So I taught myself how to code, and I got an internship at a company and started making some money, and just kind of worked my way up the chain through that until I got to a point where I was like just building systems and architectures and teaching people how to do them, and it became less and less challenging. And so that's when another buddy of mine through another band I was in reached out to me. He's like, "Hey, I got a solar company and we need software." And I was like, "Well, I could build you something." And he's like, "Okay." And I was like, "All right, well, let's do it." And so I worked off of equity for a couple of years building this software for a solar company, and we ended up bringing that to market. One of my customers ended up asking if we wanted to be acquired, and um, it made a lot of sense to me. And so, yeah, that company got acquired. And as I was building that company, I found another problem in the similar space of this. And so I started building another company while I was building that one. And that same customer acquired my first one, was like our first customer on this next one. And then he came back and was like, "Have you ever thought about this one being acquired?" I was like, "Sure, it's a good time." Yeah. So yeah, I mean now I'm just focused on I'm consulting companies in the home services space, roofing, solar, windows. I mean any sort of company in the home services space. I've been really focused on building software for them, and I consult on revenue operations, some operations, SOPs, and things like that. And then I'm also working on doing my own M&A sort of roll up, and of roofing companies in particular. So
Very cool.
yeah,
Very cool. So going back where I want to rewind a little bit
yeah.
to one thing I was going to ask you too, when you were talking about your recovery and that time you're in um, the youth camp and all that. If there was someone who was catching this show or clip that we clip out, what would you say to somebody in that age group that's struggling? I mean, what advice would you give? Yeah, I kind of word it like this: if you go back to your prior self with what you know now and talk to that kid, what would you tell him?
I would tell them do something as soon as possible to make you the most uncomfortable you can be, and persist through it.
Yeah.
There's no greater feeling than doing something that's extremely hard and uncomfortable and waking up and choosing to do that again and waking up and choosing to do that again over and over. Months into that, you have a sense of greatness that you probably never felt. You have a sense of gratitude for who you are and what this world is and what everything offers. And I promise when you're in those really, really dark, hard moments, you're not going to be able to do it all by yourself. Um,
Yeah.
and relying on a higher power, whether, it's Christ or God or whatever you want to call it, or, that's going to help you get through it. And then you kind of realize, okay, this is a whole recipe for life. I mean,
Yeah. It's not just for recovery
oh,
and getting sober. And I talk about that a lot too on the show. So many things. I mean, there's people out there, members of 12-step programs. There's people who do all kinds of different things for their recovery. Sometimes treatment helps and that works, or going back to school. I mean, somebody's recovery can look like anything. But what I always like to mention is, if the rest of our population did some of these things we have to do, like you and I have to do these things to stay
mhm,
centered and sober and successful in our life. Because for us, going back to the way we were living could obviously mean death and a lot of other things that we see happening with people. So let's shift the conversation a little bit. So that's kind of cool. You get these businesses started, you have somebody come in and buy them. Now you're furthering your business career. Let's talk about, for the last part of the call, and for those of you listening, this is where we're going to get into the really good stuff, is let's talk about like mindset. Some of the things you just mentioned. You mentioned having higher power, gratitude, mindset. Where did you start? How did you start to get into those things? I mean, was it kind of started in that youth camp, and then you
yeah,
continued reading books and going to events and seminars, or what did it look like to get the right type of mindset? Because success is a way of thinking; it's not a way
yeah,
of being, right?
absolutely. Yeah. It did start there. It hasn't been it's been it hasn't been a smooth journey since then or anything like that.
Yeah.
Definitely still have made my share of mistakes, and knowing that I had that moment in my life where I actually just chose to do the hardest thing ever, has always been something I can rely on for strength. And so, even if you just, it is about kind of stacking on those types of moments where you're choosing to do the really hard thing. Um, but that's where your character is built, is in the harder parts of your journey. And that's also that gives life fruit. I mean, that gives life meaning.
Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
happiness is fleeting. And I got into a lot of Jordan Peterson, um, got into a lot of stoicism. Stoicism is a really easy sort of mindset and way of living to approach, because it's just like really, really, really easy to understand sort of wisdom, where it's just like, okay, yeah, I can give it. It's not about not feeling emotions, or not about, not, doing that. It's about feeling things, but choosing to make the right choice when you're feeling those things. You have to embrace all of the hard things, embrace hardship, embrace your fate.
Right.
And so stoicism, yeah, I think that's a easier pill to swallow than, the Maps of Meaning by Jordan Peterson or something like that. If someone's getting into it, start by just following a stoic YouTube channel and just play it every morning when you wake up. And
Right.
it'll get you pumped to go, wow, yeah, I can do this. I can take on some hard stuff today. And I can get my mindset right. And,
Yeah.
and uh, there's also things. I mean, it doesn't have to be so, such like a cold way of kind of learning it. You can also learn it in lots of other things. I love sci-fi books, and getting into a fictional story even about a hero's journey, or something like that. You can kind of see and relate to that, and also enjoy yourself at the same time, right?
Right.
So it's
Very
all.
cool. Yeah. Yeah. And if I'm hearing you right, what I'm hearing you say is that a lot of the success you've had in life, and what you're coming up on, anyways, that will come, really does have to do with the mindset, right? And I like what you mentioned there about the way you start your day. In my experience, everybody I've got around me that is what I would consider successful in life, and I don't want people to think that's just finances, that's just a piece of it. but money's never going to make you happy. You might be a little more chipper in the morning when you wake up and your bills are paid than when you wake up and you're stressing on what to do. I think every entrepreneur has been in that spot too. Sure, you can buy a certain way to happiness, but it's not the more money you make, the more you realize it's not the most important thing in life. And it's not what's really what you're going to take with you. I think we all understand that. Yeah. And the perception from people out there is that that's not the case, that we're just out there blowing money and making all this money and we should be giving more. Entrepreneurs and people in recovery are some of the most giving people I've ever met. And there's good and bad in everything, right? Yeah. But I did hear you tap on one thing I want to expand upon, which is just the way you start our morning. So, most of us as human beings, we get out of bed or we wake up, and just by human nature, we're pessimistic type thinkers, right? We operate from a center of our brain. It's all about survival and protection. And, if you have trauma, then it's 10,000 times that. Yeah. So for most people, when they wake up, they don't wake up jacked and smiling and, hey, let's go take on the day. I know for myself, I have a whole routine I've got to do each morning. And I shouldn't say I've got to do, I get to do it. Thank God. That really centers me, balances me. And sometimes that is watching videos like that, or a big part of it for me is prayer and being spiritual. And also some self-reflection and planning on what I'm going to do for the day. But I've really seen this big thing where it's not so much a lot of times what you're doing, it's what you're putting in. And that what I mean with that is also the work, but also what you're putting into your mind, right? Do you think you could have built and sold these companies, been as successful as you were, if you weren't having a mindset of gratitude and what we call success thinking?
No.
Yeah.
I mean, I've seen it. I've seen it with even business partners of mine that I thankfully, had some good amount of space from. But, I would say these things to them like, hey, why don't we work out together? Or, what do you do? And it's like, no, I come in and I'm here and I put in the hours. Even though you're putting in the hours, a lot of the times, if you don't have that mindset, you are not getting all right. You're not focused on getting the right things done. I mean, what you do, we raised money for my second company, and gosh, there were so many dumb things we spent that money on. And it's like, it's the same sort of, same thing with your time, right? If you're not spending your time on the right things, then you're essentially wasting it. It doesn't matter where you are or what you're doing. It's, how you're spending your time, and you can't really spend your time or even your money correctly if you don't have the right mindset.
So true. And there's such a big difference in being productive, right? Yeah. And being busy.
Yep.
And for me in my business life and just life in general, these days I spend a lot more time on what I'm doing up here, what I'm visualizing, what I'm creating, what I'm writing out as goals, what I'm walking my head through. I'm a very visualizing type person. So I really like to, in the morning, take some time and visualize, what I want certain things in life to look like or whatever. And, behind me here in my studio, I've got three or four different vision boards and things like that, where I like to use that. And some people kind of laugh a little bit. They're like, you've got these collages hanging around your space.
Yeah.
But those collages are responsible for pretty much everything I've been able to create in my life. Mm-hmm. And the baseline of that, of course, is God creating it with me and for me, not myself personally. Right. But you have to do these things. It's not an option. I mean, I know very many entrepreneurs who've been successful and maybe haven't done some of these things, like watching great YouTube videos in the morning and stuff, but they are some of the most unhappy people I've ever met in my life, and some of the most unbalanced people as well. Yeah. And I think part of the work we've got to do as an entrepreneur, if you really want to maintain it and you want to be successful, long lasting, then the work you've got to do is more work on yourself and on self-improvement. And the more that you do that, right, the more you're going to see a balanced success come out on the other end. And so being busy isn't always the solution. In fact, a lot of times that will kill the business and kill your team and your relationships and things like that. It's really being productive is a combination of doing that work, making well-calculated decisions, right? Taking the risks, and then working on yourself so much that, number one, you got to believe you can do it, right? I mean, if I sat down with you at 16 years old and said, hey, in a few years here, you're going to go into the software business and you're going to sell these companies and be able to step away and just be an entrepreneur and live those dreams, you would have laughed, right? There's a process that has to take place, and there's no shortcut. But the quickest way to shortcutting yourself to success is to work harder on yourself than you do on the business. Work harder on yourself than you do the job. Work harder on yourself than you do at your marriage. Work harder on yourself than you do. And then this includes also physical, right? Yeah. I know we were talking before the show a little bit, and you're a big fan of health and fitness, which those of you listening to the show, as you listen to these podcasts, I want you to know some of the similarities. Hopefully you don't stop listening to the show and go, oh, this is the same stuff every time. It's the same stuff for a reason, you know, because it works, right? And some of these things are very, you know, just you hear them a lot. They're very, I don't know what I'm looking for, but this is why they work. And so another big thing we bring into being successful in life is our health and fitness. The reality is we only get one body, period. And if you're really religious and believe the body's a temple, great, that's one way of doing it. But it's more of the fact of like, we only get one life, and it's important what we take into our minds and our bodies, whether that's the movies we watch, the videos we watch on YouTube, right? The shows that we watch, the books we read, who we surround ourselves with. It's also the food that we take in and how active we are being, right? You know, our bodies were meant to move, not to sit. So how do you incorporate some health and fitness stuff into your day to day, and how's that helped you out?
Oh, tremendously, tremendously. I mean, that's between that and prayer, and having a close relationship with my higher power. Those two things they're at the very top of what's helped me the most. So, I mean, if I don't go to the gym, I become an anxious person. Just 2 days without it, I know
A mess, right?
it was
Yeah.
such a big difference. And it's not
Yeah.
about like getting big muscles and all that stuff that can be helpful, but it's just help you feel more confident. Maybe smaller things, but it's just about sweating and doing hard things. It's just you got something hard out of the way. I just did something that was hopefully you're pushing yourself enough to where it is hard to do.
Yeah.
That's the point of going to the gym. You don't go there just to
Yeah.
hang out and play around.
It's wild, man. I go, so I have a home gym here, which I work out probably 3 times a week and then 4 days in the other gym. And man, I'm like dripping, right? I'm like dripping. I'm huffing and puffing. I'm that guy, right?
Mhm.
People are looking at me like this guy going to kill her from a heart attack, but I'm with you. If you're
Yeah.
not sweating and you're not breathing hard, and for me, dude, we have a lot of similarities. I struggle with anxiety disorder super bad. Years ago, I used to look at people that were working out and I thought it was all about big muscles and macho and look at me. And so I kind of like had this weird resentment against it, and I stayed away. A few years back, I learned that I had a mild case of cardiovascular disease, hereditary, but my diet and my way of sitting at a desk for so long and all these things were not helping. And I had to start somewhere. And just like you start somewhere with positive thinking and working on yourself, you might have to start somewhere with fitness. 3 years ago I could do 5 sit-ups and 5 push-ups,
Mhm.
and some leg lifts in the morning. And every few days I try to add 5 more. And here I am 3 years later in the best shape of my life. But it's such an important thing for mental health, anxiety disorder, depression. There's a lot of days I don't want to go, and I'm sure you have that same thing.
Yeah.
But you're so glad after you went and you've got that out of the way, and
Yeah.
now you can almost take on anything with life and be
Yeah.
okay, right?
Yeah. Well, it's anytime I know there's something that's good I want to do, and the harder it is to have the motivation to do that thing, it is almost 100% of the time going to be the best. Like, I'm going to have the best outcome from doing that thing.
Yeah. Yeah, I
Yeah.
get that. I think one of the best quotes I've ever heard. I've heard a lot. Actually, I shouldn't say that. I have a lot of favorite quotes, but being successful in life, whether it's with your health, your relationships, your business, your career, being a great father, husband, friend, whatever, all of these things are supposed to be worth it. They're not supposed to be easy, right? And so I love this concept you have of like, do the hard things first, right? And that seems to be throughout your story of your life you've told so far. That seems to be this common thread that really is what's been able to lead to the best rewards and successes of your life.
Yeah.
I know you told me you're a father now. You've got 3 kids.
Yeah.
Obviously, you're doing what you need to do for them, and I think it's really cool that you're also taking the time to work on yourself to really be able to show up for them in a way where you didn't have. And this is another great thing about your story. People should have heard. If they didn't hear it, I'll recap it. You got someone who grew up in a way where he, by all rights and all means, he has every excuse in the world to be addicted to drugs, to not living at all, to being a deadbeat to his kids, to whatever else you want to label there. And I'm not judging people who do those things. What I'm saying is, if you're thinking that, you're missing the point. What I'm saying is, here's somebody who by all means should be in that space, and he's in the complete opposite because of those things that he grew up with, right? And that's not necessarily anyone's fault. It's not his mom's fault or anyone else's. It's the way things worked out. But that's the beauty in a story like yours, Ben, is what happens to you and how you take that. And you talked to me about perception. As we wrap up, I want to talk a little bit about that to kind of end. How big of a role does perception play for you. And what I mean by is like the way we look at the world, the way we look at obstacles, the way we look at challenges in life or things that might be hard. I mean, is that something you have to look at too? I mean,
Oh
where
yeah.
your perception is at?
Oh yeah. I think, I've actually, what's helped a lot with getting the right perception again is working with a higher power. Um, because I know, I mean, I'm a Christian, and I feel like, he lightens the load for me every day. And,
Yeah.
um, especially when I'm doing, when I'm making the right choices, doing the things I know I should be doing. Um, they're not as hard the more spiritual I am, and so I look at harder or difficult things now, and instead of thinking, oh my gosh, it's going to be so hard and whatever, one of the things Stoics say is, this might be Marcus Aurelius who said this, but never be heard complaining, not even to yourself.
Yep.
Um,
Every cell in your body is listening, right?
Yep, yep. So, if you feel like there's complaints, if you do have a higher power, you can pray to have that anxiety or that sort of feeling of burden, lifted a bit to help you out. But then, there's also the thought of the reward at the end of it. There's real rewards to things you do. Most of the best things you can do, the rewards are definitely never instant. They take
Yeah.
a lot of persistence and a lot of belief in yourself and a lot of grinding and continuing to do the thing is good until you start to see those. But when you see them, they're lasting. They're not instant gratification either. That's one of the things in the boys' ranch they really pushed was delayed gratification.
Yeah. So smart to get that lesson early on. We live in an instant gratification society, right?
Yeah.
And it's been created that way. I mean, let's just talk honestly and openly about it. I'm not a conspiracy guy. I guess I kind of am, but it's been created that way. You know what I mean? Every commercial, every new iPhone that comes out, every whatever,
Yeah.
um, that's how our brains work. We want things now, right?
Yeah.
And if you're in recovery and you suffer from substance use disorder, it's even worse
Ugh.
because you're an instant gratification junkie as well, and you really have to combat that with those small little wins each day, right? Like working out every single day, and over time, it's the consistency that gives you the body you want
Yeah.
and the health you want. It's not doing it for a month or two that's going to do the deal. It doesn't matter what you're doing, how much you're dieting, how much you're whatever you're taking, how much GLP-1 you're on or whatever else these days. Like it really comes down to doing the work if you want to keep it,
Yeah.
right? And that to me that means the work on yourself and also the work on the actual business, and the work like leadership skills and things like that. So
Yep.
makes sense. Well, awesome, Ben. It was really good hearing from you. Tell me, we got a couple minutes left, and I always like to wrap up with, this question. For the people that are listening, if you were just to take two kind of principles or two successful ways of thinking that you live by that you feel like make the most difference or would make the most difference for people listening, what would those two things be?
I mean, I'm going to reiterate on that. Never be heard complaining, not even to yourself. Be grateful for your challenges. Be grateful for your hard times. Oh man, adopting that is something that can get you anywhere you want to go in life. So
Yeah, it's life changing, right? I mean, I think I so agree, man. And the more entrepreneurs I interview and the more people I bring into my network and have over the years, it's crazy how much of it is just the similarities. I mean, self-talk's a big thing. And I'm the type of person where it doesn't come naturally to me. Like I said, I suffered from addiction as well. And even though I'm in recovery now and doing the things I need to do daily to stay sober and centered and helpful, my brain still operates a lot of the same way where it's a challenge, which is why for me personally, doing a gratitude list every morning, right? Sometimes a couple times a day. If I start to find myself getting agitated, anxious, resentful, fearful, I can almost always track that back to being grateful for something or an expectation of something like an instant gratification expectation, right? So I like that you brought that up. Be very aware of what you're saying to yourself because we create our own realities.
do it.
And the only person you really got to worry about how you talk to them is yourself. If you don't worry about that, then
You're
you're going to end up
welcome,
talking to
kids.
everyone else the wrong way.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know,
Yeah. Yeah. For sure.
very cool. And then what was the second thing you said there?
Um, I mean, yeah, I mean, not be heard complaining, letting it yourself, and then being grateful for everything, the good things and the bad things in your life. So,
How does somebody how can someone be grateful for the bad things? Walk me through that process in your head. That's a good
Yes. Yeah.
way to wrap up here. I mean, how does that work?
I mean, if you have to, just say it out loud. Start by saying it out loud, even if you don't believe it.
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes I don't even realize, like, I'll wake up and I don't want to go to the gym. And then I'll just kind of blink and I'm at the gym because I've kind of made that a thing.
Right.
I go, it's my thing I do. But if I was to just focus on that thought of not wanting to go to the gym, if it came to that point, I would just say, I'm so grateful I can go to the gym. I'm so grateful I can go to the gym. I'm so grateful I have the body and I have legs that work. I have a
Yeah.
truck with gas in it. I can go to the gym. This is awesome. And you say that and you're like, oh my gosh, your mind will follow. It's kind of like if your body does something, your mind will follow the same thing too. So you can do things physically outward to get your
Yeah.
mindset to where it needs to be.
Which
So
I think is a point maybe we missed on real quick is just this whole idea of being healthy and treating yourself the right way. It the words are just as important as the actions, but I have noticed one thing that it did for me is it really strengthened. It's like sometimes I'll be in the gym too, and there's something I'm doing, or it's like one more set, or a new exercise, or I'm already at the end of my workout. It's like I don't have in what I have in what I plan to do,
mhm.
and I really have to sit there and think, just like what you mentioned. I have to tell myself, okay, body, this is who talks to you. It's not the other way around, right? And you're going to do this, and you can do it, and then you can. And I think it's a great point to make where you said, even if you don't believe it, say it out loud, because most people have no problem saying horrible things to themselves out loud.
Yeah.
And they do it off the cuff, and sometimes it's
Yeah.
passive aggressive, and sometimes you're not even aware you're doing it. And then when you tell somebody, hey, why don't we start saying positive things about ourselves out loud? It's actually easier and it works. It's hard to believe because people get stuck in their patterns, but I think that's a good thing to bring up because a lot of people think that you just snap a finger and you start thinking positive and your whole life changes. It's a
No,
day-to-day battle you have to
every
keep
day.
winning, right?
Every day.
Every day.
Absolutely.
I get it, man. Well, again, Ben, it was great having you on the show. I really appreciate it. We had a really good conversation, and I look forward to connecting some more. And hopefully, everyone who's listening to these podcasts as we grow, and you see different clips out there on social media, tune into the show, watch the full show because we do go over the best things at the end. And if you're struggling, like I said in the beginning, you reach out to us on one of our social media challenges. Those are monitored and watched. If somebody needs help, we're always happy to help and point you in the right direction. In addition to that, if you are somebody who has a great story and wants to come on the show and share that with people, please reach out to me just like Ben did. You never know how many people you're going to help with your story. And the only thing by holding that in and not talking about your struggles and your perseverance, the only thing it's doing is costing people lives, right? And when we talk about our challenges and our troubles and the vulnerable things in life, we end up saving lives by sharing that. And I think vulnerability is probably the biggest strength you can have in the world outside of anything we've spoke about. Awesome, Ben. Well, I'm going to let you go and enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks so much for coming on and look forward to connecting with you soon.
Okay. Thanks a lot, Chris.
You're welcome. Bye.
Cheers. Yeah.
Well, that's it for today's episode of Let's Do More. I hope you found inspiration, hope, and some powerful takeaways to help you on your own journey of growth and resilience. Remember, no matter what you're facing, you have the strength to overcome it and the power to create positive change in your life and community. If you enjoyed this episode, please take a moment to subscribe, rate, download, and review the podcast. It really helps us reach more people who need to hear these stories. And don't forget to follow us on social media and stay connected and be part of the Let's Do More community. You can find us on Facebook at Let's Do More Podcast, Instagram and TikTok at Let's Do More.life, X at Let's Do More Life, and our primary channel is on YouTube at Let's Do More. We'd love to hear from you. Share your thoughts, share your stories, or let us know what topics you'd like to hear about next. Thanks again for tuning in. Until next time, remember, let's keep pushing forward, inspiring each other, and doing more for ourselves and the world around us. Take care, and I'll see you on the next show.